business development at Truex. Chris is responsible for all the new partner integrations and works with publisher product teams to create a premium user experience for transferring and monetizing attention. And his company, Truex, which we're going to see some cool examples of what they do today, designs and delivers advertising for innovative media. Please give a round of applause for Chris. Mark Popkowitz has come all the way from London. He's the CEO of Myriad. Myriad is a video technology company and was formed to deliver advertising for what they call the skip generation. They've developed platforms that deliver native video and advertising. They take brands and put them into content in a very cool way. We're going to see some examples of what they do as well today. Their patented technology was recently recognized as a top innovator and Hollywood disruptor in 2016. And please give a big round of applause to Mark Popkowitz. Next to Mark is Jason Bercovici, Senior Manager, Creative Strategy at Experiential. Experiential is a technology-first advertising company that enables brands to drive consumer engagement and business results in the digital landscape. And he's responsible for all the go-to-market strategy and product development and operations for their product. Welcome, Jason. Thank you. And one more, last but not least, Tom Herman is the CEO at Dashbid, came all the way in from New York today to be here with you. Dashbid's a leading programmatic SSP, helping publishers increase return on their inventory by creating visibility and demand across dozens of networks globally. Through his career, he's been an entrepreneur and founder of half a dozen companies that I'm not going to name, but a bunch of them. And he's even a private pilot and dabbles in AR and VR. Welcome. Tom. So let's start the discussion today by talking about the need for more innovative video ads. So unless you live under a rock, you've heard that consumers seem to hate 30-second ads, and they hate disruptive ads, and they're proving that by downloading ad blockers. In January of 2000, oh, hi. You just missed your introduction, but you can go up there and sit over there. Joining us just now is Deb Ray, Chief Data Officer at Video Amp. So he's focused on developing the data platform and the data science that enables advertisers and media owners to transact seamlessly. All of the data questions will be going to Deb this morning. Okay, so in January 2015, 181 million ad blockers had been downloaded globally. And that number grew 41% from the previous year. So for the audience, how many of you guys have ever downloaded an ad blocker? Desktop and mobile, or just desktop?
Just desktop.
Desktop. How about mobile? All right. So how satisfied are you? I'm just curious. I have not downloaded one. How satisfied are you? Has it changed your experience? Are you? Does it work?
It's been years for me, mainly because where I draw my paycheck now.
And you guys, does it make your experience better, or is it still terrible?
Far better.
Far better.
Yeah.
All right, so for Chris and Jason, can you talk about ad blocking solutions that you're seeing that may or may not be a product of your own company? Like, how are you thinking about these solutions, these ad blocking solutions? Are they working? Is that going to be the only solution, or is there going to be something else that's going to make the experience for people better than just an ad blocker?
So, yeah, I'm happy to start. So I think there's actually a growing consensus on the solution to ad blocking. And that is to make ads load more quickly and make the browsing experience better by getting rid of all the really intrusive and annoying ads. And it's interesting because the IAB, the Interactive Ad Bureau, did a study, I think it was released a couple months ago, where they found that of the 25% of people who used ad blockers, maybe 2/3 of them said that they would stop using ad blockers if it just wasn't such a horrible experience. And so what you're seeing now is you're seeing the IAB coming out with recommendations. It's called their Lean Ads Initiative, and they're recommending that ads not be intrusive, not pop up in front of users. The sound doesn't come on when you don't expect it. It doesn't push aside page content, and also that the ads are a lot lighter in weight, so they load more quickly. and they're aggressively pushing this. A lot of publishers, including some publishers who played with those solutions where they detect an ad blocker and they say, please disable your ad blocker, we depend on your ads, or pay us for an ad light or ad-free experience. A lot of these publishers are now moving towards having teams, internal teams, where they go and they look at their user experience and ensure that it's not annoying, or they have feedback loops that users can do it. And so I think that look, both Chris and I, our products are based on permission-based advertising, asking users to view an ad when they're ready to and when they're comfortable to, and that is great because that only benefits the user and the publisher, right? We've had positive responses from both, and I think that is going to grow industry-wide and continue.
Chris, what do you think?
So the idea, I mean, we all know users would prefer like a less intrusive ad, but there has to be a point where there's value for the advertisers, which is kind of what's led us to where we are today, is advertisers desperately trying to get the message across because folks are banner blind, not seeing the message. And as Jason mentioned, the idea of like permission-based advertising or getting an opt-in and then actually effectively capturing that attention is, I think, the way to go.
Have you guys read that Facebook recently made a blocker of the ad blocker? Sure. And then now, of course, what do you think is going to happen next? I mean, the ad blocker people are just going to make another thing. Do you think we're going to go forward with this cat and mouse game, or are we going to try and build a better mousetrap?
To some degree, right? So Facebook is uniquely Facebook, right? They can disguise their advertising to look the exact same as all the content they send users because they have this tremendous walled garden. But this isn't a solution for most advertisers. And so you do see some advertisers doing some of the cat and mouse, blocking people and asking them to turn it off. But until you solve the overall problem of how awful the experience is when the ad blocking software is not working, you're not going to get consumers to adopt that. There's also people who pay some of these ad blocking companies to whitelist their ads and show it. And that's not a long-term solution either, because consumers are going to be like, well, I used your software, so it blocked ads, and now you're showing me ads, and they're going to dump that ad blocker. So,
and for Mark and Mike, do you think there's a prediction, your opinion of the future of what this is going to look like? Like right now, everyone's saying, well, it's just going to be about more creative content. Is that true? Or can you see something else down the road that we don't know about of what content is going to look like and ad blocking is going to look like?
I mean, ultimately, it costs money to create content. And so I think this is all, we're going to look back in a few years and we were like, God, remember when everybody only talked about ad blocking? It's this is an issue for commodity entertainment sites because there's 9,000 of them. And I can find out the latest about Brad and Angelina on any site. So that's not, it's not unique. There's going to be some happy medium of better user experience through non-interruptive ads, faster load times, just a better user experience. But also, there's got to be a balance for content creators because it costs money to employ people.
Mark, what do you think?
Well, so I'm going to be dramatic here. I think we're entering a cold war of advertising. Watching the watching TV recently, especially last night, you just see combative elements of growing in all sorts of walks of life, and I think we've now seen an escalation of the issue in advertising. Audiences don't particularly want advertising, and that's a bitter pill to swallow if that's your business. It's usually a disruptive experience. We all know it. If I asked you today in this group, how many of you remember an ad that you've seen in the last week? It's a very simple question. We can get sophisticated about the answers, but I bet not many. I mean, raise your hands if you remember the core message of an ad you've seen on TV or online in the last week. 1, 2, 3. So let's say 10% of the audience, 15% of the audience. And I think audiences are voting. They're voting because they're going out of their way to download ad blocking software. They're voting because they're ignoring ads, and we know that. That's been well researched. 2 years ago, when I used to go around the industry and talk about what we do, there was no, it's all fine. The pre-roll is just perfect, and we like the 30-second spot. We don't want that world to change. Today, that's changed dramatically. So I think we're seeing an escalation. I think we're seeing consumers voting, simply ignoring or blocking. And I think we're seeing the technology businesses in particular finding ways around that, and that's a classic escalation that you might see. I think the good output of this is going to be more creativity, so I think we're going to see storytelling take a better form. I think there's no room for poor storytelling, to the point that you can go somewhere else and enjoy the content somewhere else for a moment without interruption. So I think storytelling's got to get better, but I also think the mechanism for communicating the proposition's got to get better. Did you know, I mean, we know that it takes 30 milliseconds, 30,000th of a second, for an audience member to block out an ad the moment it comes up on the screen.
You mean psychologically?
Psychologically. So we're the best ad blockers ourselves, actually. You don't need tech to do it.
Right. Why download
Why
something?
download it?
Just block it out.
We blank it. I mean, we all know this. Everybody in this room knows it. We do it, which is why if you see an ad come up online, 2 seconds later you ask yourself, what was that about? You've already forgotten, because your mind blocked it out. So we've got to find smarter ways to engage. I think in traditional forms of advertising, that means make the ad valuable to the consumer.
All right, so that is a good segue. So Mark asked the audience, who's seen an ad that they can remember the core value or the core messaging of in the last week? Can anybody in this room say that they remember an interactive ad or an ad that they have participated in that they remember in the last week? Okay, so, all right, maybe there's not enough of them, but it doesn't seem like even those ads where we're getting more creative and asking people to participate doesn't seem, now this is a small sample group, right? So maybe for the number of them that are out there, we need more. Can I ask the audience, is there anything happening in advertising that you're finding engaging right now? Is there anything that you're like, I saw this and it was great and it was a great experience with an ad? Yes.
Well, I personally think a lot of it's generational as well. So, so I'm kind of like, at my age, which will go unsaid, I'm kind of stuck on my products. I'm stuck on, what I like. I'm already, I'm that consumer that company doesn't have to reach to anymore, right? So I'm just always looking for a good deal with that product, right? Can I?
You don't care whether it's interactive. You're willing to see a 30-second spot.
Right. No, I'm willing. No, actually, you're right. I'm willing to watch anything if it gets me a better deal on my $400 ridiculous skincare cream, right? So if I can get it for $300 or $200, I'm right there, and I'm going to buy it, and I'll buy like 3 or 4 of them just to have them, right? Because I think it's about the deal. But I do think that I'm the advertiser, okay? And I will tell you that I totally agree with you. And I think that the only way people are going to, especially the millennials and some of the younger Xers and the Zs, are going to get involved in the advertising, and really bring advertising back is through gamification, is through interactivity, and it's really incumbent upon the advertiser to be very creative.
Now, while she's talking about these younger generations, Mike, as it relates to mobile, which is where they all are, is there really exciting things happening in mobile that you can talk about for ad experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we, 2 years ago, if you said, hey, Facebook is going to shove your newsfeed with a bunch of autoplay video, we all would have said, that sounds like the worst idea consumer experience ever, right? And I literally would go on my stump speech and say, this sounds terrible. Well, 2 years later, it's actually not that bad of a user experience, and we offer a similar type of experience at Share-Through, primarily on mobile. And what we've done is a lot of research around it, and millennials in particular said 79% said that they would prefer an autoplay video rather than a static image because it allows them to preview the content before they decide to watch it or not. And when I heard that stat, I said, oh my God, that's exactly what I do. I do that with friends' videos. I'm like, okay. You watch 3 or 4 seconds, and in that 3 or 4 seconds, to Mike's point, you can block out an ad that quick, but if I'm already in 3 or 4 seconds, that's 3 or 4 seconds that a brand has an opportunity to actually tell a story. And if they go ahead and click on it and watch even more of it, but there's an opportunity to relay almost a narrative or a theme within that opportunity.
And so Deb and Tom, would you guys say that 3 or 4 seconds is enough? Like, is that all kind of, if what Mike is saying is that now in 3 or 4 seconds from the data and the work you've been doing, is that really all we need? Can we make the commercials just 3 or 4 seconds and have it be it?
And just I would clarify one thing on that. What Facebook offers, what we offer is a 10-second view. But the reality is also, think of your own user behavior, be it in your social feed or your news feed. For me, it's Google News in the morning. I read 50 articles. I don't read 50 articles. I maybe read one, but I whip through it and I see one headline. It says, new Tesla gets 500 miles to the charge. Check. I've kind of read that article. I don't need to click into it, read it. I've got the whole sort of point, the gist of the article. So in the same way, that took me how long to read that sentence? It probably took me 2 or 3 seconds.
What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, the point earlier was very interesting, which is advertising is all about storytelling, and a 30-second ad, 10-second ad, that doesn't afford you enough time for a brand to tell the whole story. So what we're really seeing is, even though the medium themselves that allow for only 10, 30 seconds at most, it's really turning more into telling a story sequentially, right? Targeting the user as different parts of the storytelling journey across their different devices. So especially with cross-screen advertising, one of the things that we're saying is starting the storytelling journey with TV and then finding the user, engaging them again on their desktop,
And that
on their
doesn't mean
mobile.
necessarily the same spot. It can mean that the story continues with a different narrative and a different piece.
fact,
of
it
it.
has
Absolutely.
to.
Yeah.
You has to. That's where you're saying it's already going, or you think
That's
the
where
only answer?
I think there's a more fundamental question. Publishers need to make money, right? So what are we seeing? Which publishers are being successful? They're the publishers that are being innovative and changing. You look at publishers like BuzzFeed, they have an entirely different view on how to interact with their customers. You got to give the reader or the viewer or the consumer a more engaging experience, and then you start to have the opportunity to do exactly what Deb is talking about, to insert pieces of the story in different ways over time. People do see those banners. People might catch the first 2 seconds of an ad, but you need opportunities to engage them in the feed or within an article, and it needs to be done in a way that fits that particular user. So BuzzFeed spends an awful lot of time customizing the consumption experience individually for every single user. And the same thing needs to be done with the advertising. It needs to be thoughtfully embedded within the overall experience, which is why native makes sense, and which is why being able to tell stories over time, and it's data driven, all of that stuff is critical.
So you guys have all mentioned important points. My friend in the back here mentioned gamification, you mentioned personalization, you mentioned cross-screen. Chris Shively's company, Truex, has provided us with a cool example of something they did, not for a publisher, but for Fox Television and for an advertiser, Dodge. Should I refresh this?
Yeah, just refresh it.
So we're going to tell us a little bit about what this is?
Sure. So we covered a little on our question, but we operate off of an opt-in. The idea that we don't want the experience to be intrusive or interruptive. We want it to be enabling for the user, make their life better in some way. Because that's, how do you get a user's attention for 3 or 4 seconds to tell them there's a sale on a skin cream? We can give you 30, we can tell you where the sale is, how to go get it, all of that. But we have to make that experience palatable so you're not ad blocking. So here, we're going to give you a chance to get rid of 2.5 minutes worth of, call them normal commercials or 30-second mid-roll slots by interacting with one ad. We can do that because we can create so much more value here because we're quantifying the attention delivered from the user. So if you can go ahead and launch that.
Yep.
So the first key component is that user opt-in, right? It's enabling, they're already happy about it, it's making their life better. That loads a full screen experience. So you've got all the user's attention, there's no adjacency issues here. And then
I can skip if I want to skip.
there's a ton of stuff in here for the user to do, so they're still kind of choosing their experience even now, whether they want the video, whether they want to go into the rich media. So they're going to slide over the Dodge. They can now jump into the new Challenger, open the hood, etc. So really, the important thing here too is the quality of this attention. The user understands this is part of their path to getting back to their show. It's helping them do that faster, and so they're focusing their attention on this, as opposed to the term's exogenous attention, which is that annoying, there's a flea here, which is your 30 millisecond reaction to killing this pop-up that everybody has with current advertising.
So let me ask a question to Deb. How about the quality cross-screen? Now, how are we going to manage and judge the quality of pieces on cross-screen?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because each of these different channels, and in a lot of cases in agencies, they're governed by different different groups within agencies as well. So digital, there's a lot more precise, more granular ways of measurement. When you go to TV, it's much more aggregated. So quality is really, and each of these platforms are kind of defining their own way of measurement, right? There's a ton of different measurement, different TLAs coming up. So really, the one thing that we've seen is, like, if you've settled on the fact that digital inventory is viewable, that's the first hurdle to cross. After that, it's also bringing some of the TV metrics like GRPs closer to the digital side. So digital side, we're talking about segments. TV industry is still talking about males 18 to 34. So bridging those two by taking online data and some of the TV measurements we're looking at, that's giving you much more a much better sense of who the audience is and how they ultimately convert. So somewhere in between the digital side and the TV side is where some of these new measurement standards are coming in, like with ComScore and some of the smart TV data. That's where you're able to tie in TV viewership with online viewership. So bringing those together is where really you get to the best of both worlds. Measurement at an individual level as well as a broader audience level.
So let's keep talking about data a little bit. Jason, so with all this data that's available, how can advertisers ensure that they're efficiently reaching the target audience and driving sales? How are we taking this data and actually proving that people can be making money with it?
Sure. So it's hard, right? And we're not doing a great job of it today. I think there are two parts to this, right? One is knowing what the data represents and where it comes from. And the second thing is knowing what the metrics represent, using quality metrics to evaluate the data. So unless you're collecting the data yourself, if you're working with a third-party vendor who has their own data, or if you're buying it off the shelf, there's a wide spectrum of really good data to not so good data. And you need transparency in order to understand what the data represents, and that's important, right? But you can actually measure the quality of the data if you use the right metrics. So in video today, everybody's still focused on click-through rates and completion rates. And by themselves, these are not good indications of true value, right? If somebody actually paid attention to the ad. And so the two things that are important here are, one, you can actually take a hint from performance advertisers and use really good metrics, like something meaningful in terms of an online conversion. So I'll give you an example. For an automotive advertiser, if I go to the site and build and price a car, I'm very interested in that brand and perhaps even likely to buy and likely to buy soon. If I'm a TV tune-in advertiser, people who come to my site and log in with their cable provider and watch a show, they're the viewers I want for that show. So there's a couple things you can do once you have this data. One, you can evaluate the different data you have based on how well they reach these people. But these people aren't always the same, like in-market people that you're looking for with video. You might have like people who are likely to become customers several months from now, not tomorrow. So you can also use data modeling technology to look at the people you're reaching with a particular data segment, and then look at the people you know are your most valuable customers and compare them and see which data segment matches up there. And the other thing I'll share is that, and I know Chris and I might get in a little spar over this, but having the metrics represent true attention, it's difficult, but it can be achieved. And a lot of this has to do with the user's incentive to view, right? If I'm asking people to view and interact with an ad so that they can get 30 minutes of ad-free music on Spotify, it's questionable whether they're really going to be interested in my product. And if they're even really paying attention, they might just I do this on Spotify, I hit play, I let the video play, I don't even watch it when I'm in my car. So that might not be the best incentive to get people. If you don't let people skip your ads, right, they're going to mentally tune out anyway. So you should give them the option to skip. But when you design a really good user experience to give people the control and the option to view or not to view, what happens is that video completion metric starts to become really meaningful, right? A lot more meaningful in terms of actual attention than just something. And that becomes a better metric to optimize to and to judge by.
Chris, You have a opposing point of view?
Sure.
I love opposing points of view.
It's actually not that different, but to some extent, again, like the reaction, you're hoping to get the user into this experience to let them play. We do the same thing. We just start them down that path. It's an active choice. This passive choice, when I cruised through your site this morning too, like you're already running pre-roll, and then you're trying to get a user to roll that open and then go explore it. So you've already interrupted them. And you're just hoping this little dangling thing attracts them, gets them in
Stay
there.
longer.
They then interact, and you can show, once they're in there interacting, you can show a ton of value there. We just think the difference is starting them on that path. And again, we're only doing that for something that makes their life better. So they were already here, in that example we saw, Fox was going to show them 5 30-second spots, make their money as a publisher anyway. We're giving them a choice. They may have chosen to do that and then said, this is just faster and I'm going to ignore it. But we've at least captured their attention to start that experience as opposed to just passively waiting.
Well, aside from actively having people participate, Mark's company has done a lot of extensive research in a laboratory using eye tracking technology to, in a passive way, actually see what viewers are actually looking at when they are looking at the screen. Can you talk about that a little bit, Mark? And then I'm going to show your example.
Yeah, sure. So, perhaps I set some context for why we do this. We put brands into content. We've got to a stage with technology where you can literally put in a brand, a product, signage into original content so it looks like it's always been there. It's kind of the newest form of the oldest form of advertising there is, which is product placement, but now moved into a world where you can plan your campaigns by reach and frequency and do all those great things. But we wanted to understand what audiences, I'm being a member of an audience, what do we actually look at when we look at content? What are we thinking when we look at content? At the end of the day, if I'm an advertiser, I want to build loyalty, I want to make you want my product, and that's what we wanted to kind of figure out. So we put a lot of people into laboratories, we put goggles on their heads which enable the computer to track what the audience is looking at. And we discovered some interesting things. Now, this is the sort of technology that's used to help designers create aircraft cockpits or design websites. We took it to content. And I mean premium entertainment content, soaps, sitcoms, music videos, and so on, the sort of thing you might see on TV and online.
Should I hit play?
Yeah, run the video there. So what you'll see is, hopefully in a moment, all those little dots reflect where the audiences are actually looking, what they're concentrating on. And we discovered they're looking at two things. They're looking at the performers' faces, and they're looking at the brands. So genuinely, the human eye goes to the face, the eye line, because that's how we communicate. But then surprisingly, they go to the brand. And it doesn't matter whether they recognize the brand or not, they find the brand and they go to it time and time and time again. And this was a light bulb moment, because we said, okay, if we can capture that effect in a way that has integrity with the content, but actually, use the word reservedly, hijacks the moment in the show that you're engaged with to introduce the product, we may be onto something.
So, Tom, how do publishers then leverage first-party data like this and work with their ad sales teams to really help publishers win? Like, how are we going to leverage these two things together?
Well, the reality is they don't, and that's part of the problem. I think we're talking a lot about the advertising side of things here, but in fact, it needs to be the publisher's responsibility to really do two things. One, of course, provide entertainment or content value. But the other thing that they need to do is provide value to the advertiser, and it's got to be their job to do it. So they need to be taking the type of information that they use to customize the news feed, and they need to be learning about their audience and using it and leveraging it in a way that benefits the advertiser. So what we see...
Do you think the onus is more on the part of the publisher than it is on the advertiser?
I think the opportunity is on the part of the publisher, because what's happened is the buy side has really taken over responsibility. It has more of the power. Big platforms like Google and Facebook have disintermediated the relationship between the publisher and the brand, or the publisher and the agency. Nobody should know the audience better than the publisher. And as a result, the publisher should be able to help those brands interact with across time and in individual spots with the viewers. And I don't think the problem is so much the interruptive nature. I think the problem is we're seeing ads that aren't all that relevant. Well, we're working real hard to get the news feed to have articles in it that people want to click on. You want to see that the Tesla gets 500 miles, and someone put that in front of you, undoubtedly a relatively sophisticated publisher put that in front of you because they knew that was what you wanted. So the idea is, how do we get the power back to the publishers so that they can gather that data, use that data to go out and find the right advertisers that match their audience and connect them. Connect them over time, connect them over different platforms. Bring that data together. What are they doing when they're on your properties on their desktop? What are they doing when they're on your properties on a connected TV? What are they doing on their mobile? And how are those different touch points opportunities? We need to build that user graph as publishers, and we need to make sure that we understand the experience. The other thing that happens when we outsource this advertising is that the experience on the page goes to hell. Right? Why is it that all these pages are loading so slowly and consuming so much bandwidth and crashing? It's generally not the publishers. The publishers don't know what's happening on the page frequently or in the mobile app. It's the advertising side, and it's the intermediaries. I'm guilty to some degree because I'm one of them, but that's what's causing the problems. So we need to make sure that the publishers retake control, understand what's happening, see where their data is leaking out. The buy side is able to do better targeting because they're stealing all the data from the publishers.
Okay, so that brings me to a question for
Stealing.
Ray then. So Ray, whatever is being stolen or being taken, whatever this data is, how then are brands able to now retarget and use these other platforms to take that data and make something useful out of it with our whole notion about cross-platform?
Right, and I mean the whole purpose of the brand is, again, to talk about their whole brand story, right? And it just doesn't happen through one spot alone. And there's some survey results earlier that are very interesting, which is what causes people to disengage with ads. A, they don't find that the ads are very relevant to them, and B, they don't find the creative very interesting. So creative aside, the issue is that the right ad is not being targeted to the right person at the right time. So
Listen, it wasn't too many years ago when I joke and say, when the internet kind of started, I kept getting ads all day long for the penis extender.
Yep.
And I used to say, how is this possible? It's got to be a better mousetrap.
Right.
But we're getting much, much better today. I mean, it's not perfect, but I feel like I get completely relevant ads all the time.
Yeah, and the technology is really out there right now to enable brands to utilize the data to tell a much better story. So now, their device graphs, for one, allows you to see what one user and what all the devices are that they're engaging with, whether it's their office computer, their mobile phone, their TV at home. Then using the data from all these different sources so that like the simplest thing possible is you're not showing the same ad to that user over and over on their multiple different devices, right? That's a simple thing to do. Capping the frequency, right? If looking at click-through data, that's important so that you're not seeing the same banner ad over and over. So these are kind of the basics, but to go beyond that is to actually see how people are engaging with ads across their different devices. So obviously the type of ads that people engage with at home on their TV is very different than the one that they'll use on their mobile phones. That's kind of to incite more immediate action, right?
So
They're
then
out
as the
there.
price for these expensive creatives and interactive stuff, and now there's expense for the technology that we need to look at where they're going, and now we gotta do different creative on different platforms, somewhere the cost has to be cut. And that might be in humans on the execution side. So my question for Mike Gaffney is there a place for programmatic here? Like, is all this stuff, we're increasing the cost on all this other stuff, on the data we need to find the right person on all the different platforms, is it gonna be done programmatically, and is there a place for programmatic with native?
Yeah, I mean, I think the analog is, what are we in we're in the seventh year of the year of mobile, right? And agencies had mobile and mobile is just a thing. It's not separate anymore. In fact, most of the traffic, most of our own behaviors on these mobile screens. There's somebody taking a video right there with their camera, with their phone. You know what I mean? It's just a way of life. So people need to separate the word programmatic. Oh, programmatic, that's all about data and targeting and getting me to, buy that pair of shoes that was in my Amazon checkout counter, my cart, that I didn't actually purchase. Programmatic is just a vehicle for a machine to buy an ad.
With another machine.
Yeah, to automate the process, make it more efficient. That doesn't mean that it needs to be only to retarget me because of my cart in Amazon. It could be about the right brand video that I want to see about the Charger car in the feed of Car and Driver Road and Track. That can be bought programmatically today. So it's at its relatively new stage because those ads are dynamic and they're dynamically assembled. They're a little bit more difficult from a technology standpoint to buy programmatically like a banner, because a banner is a fixed asset. A Netflix banner looks the same on CBS Sports as it does on People magazine, whereas you want that ad to be relevant to the user, so you use data to get relevancy, but then you also use some of the programmatic and the technology to make it feel custom and native to the environment where it renders in that feed.
We have a question from a gentleman in the back.
Yeah, actually, I was going to, something similar to that. I was going to say, how do you think advertising will change or differ as the IoT starts allowing for different hardware mediums to start affecting advertising? So, for example, advertising in autonomous cars or on autonomous cars, or even AR, VR advertising in your daily devices, or even like postcard emulator advertising, stuff like that.
I'm no Internet of Everything IoT expert, but I think it's all about sort of consumer behavior. So we're saying that, I'm not necessarily saying that interruptive ads are bad. Look, if automotives are still pounding TV ads because what we're saying is that if you can do that,
And it works.
yeah, and it works, keep doing it. What we're saying is the window to do that is changing. But when we talk about native ads, so a search ad is very different from an ad that I find within my newsfeed or on Facebook when I'm more in a discovery mode, right? When I go to my Google newsfeed, my example from before, I'm not necessarily sure I'm going to read about the election or the Tesla or the New York Jets, unfortunately my favorite sports team. But because I'm more in a discovery mode but when I go to search, I'm looking for the skin cream. I'm looking for running shoes. I know what I'm looking for, so it's a very different type of behavior than going through my news feed. Likewise, when I'm in my autonomous car, I'm in my kitchen looking at a device that all of a sudden has a screen. The branding they're advertising, it can't be a 30-second pre-roll for a car necessarily in my kitchen. It just needs to be relevant to the consumption and the behavior that I'm doing at that moment in time.
I'm really glad you brought up VR. I want to touch upon that for a minute. How many people in here have already using a VR headset of some kind? Okay, great. How many of you are hoping to buy one of these VR headsets sometime in the next year? And can the people that are already using it tell me about a brand experience? Are you using it to just like, the one I use? I bought the cheap cardboard Google one, and I walk around Africa, but I've never had a brand experience. Does anybody have a brand experience they can talk about on VR? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so over at the Consumer Electronics Show, there's a new company that's coming out with an electric car. It's called Faraday Future. And so what they did is they put people down in kind of like a reclining position, like they were in the car. And then the VR experience was you were getting driven around in the car.
You were driving or you were getting driven?
You were getting driven, so your perspective was the passenger. So you were getting driven through a lot of environments, and evidently BMW's been doing this. So VR for car sales.
Thank you. Did you have one too?
Yes, the tequila, they took you through a history of making the tequila and all the heritage you have to bring out, so it was very interesting.
And how about for Mark and Tom, how can VR content be ad supported in an interesting and non-offensive way? I think those are two different examples. One feels much better to me than the other. Like I probably wouldn't be so interested in hearing about the history of tequila unless I could have the feeling like I'm drinking tequila or the after effects of tequila. Kind of being driven around in a car sounds more interesting to me. What do you guys think are the interesting ways, non-offensive, they're going to use this?
Well, I'll jump in on this. So I think both of those examples cited experiential, you're experiencing a product. And if you can create an experience that is compelling, then clearly you've got a direction. You can go in that direction. And cars lend themselves. If you make soap, the two largest brands by Unilever and Procter & Gamble, biggest by far spenders on advertising around the world. If you make soap and coffee, it's going to be tough to get an experiential, ad on VR for Ponds. Great product. They're investors in my business, so hey. But I think that's a different kettle of fish. If you do cars, absolutely appropriate. So we've taken a slightly different approach. We with Havas about 18 months ago put the first brands into VR content. So we actually put the brands into the experience. We didn't stop the VR experience to run an interruptive VR ad, which is I think what we're all kind of thinking about. You're kind of in your immersive experience. You're playing a game or you're watching some kind of augmented reality movie or whatever it might be, and then you stop it and you have an ad. We did something else. We put the products into the experience, into that universe, with very interesting results, because audiences would go up or the participants would go up, they'd walk around the brand, or they'd look at the brand. So providing you can make it contextually relevant and not break someone out of a hugely immersive. The thing about VR is it is immersive. You are in another world. If you interrupt that experience, we've all seen the movies where you get snapped out of
I am hoping that they are not going to have VR where they stop and have a commercial.
Oh, but
I'm
there are.
killing myself.
No,
if that
but
happens.
there are. If you look at a lot of the companies providing first generation VR ads, that's exactly what they do.
I thought it was going to be you walk into the REI store in your VR headset and you can touch the stuff and pick it up and whatever.
Yeah, but it'll be in the middle of Walking Dead VR, probably.
And that is an ad. That is a VR ad. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I agree on the insertion. We do that for sure. One of our sample ads is Times Square, where we've replaced all the billboards with the Dashbid logo. Certainly, you can imagine any VR environment in which you would traditionally see ads on the side of the road, inside of an airport. All of those are opportunities to place brands, and I think that will happen. But with the luxury brands, there's a lot of great experiences. Travel is a perfect example. There's a lot of people that do want to go to Africa, and sponsored content is probably one of the first areas that we're going to see a lot of financial transactions related to advertising. The travel agency that wants to sponsor a really high quality experience in a destination that they're trying to sell travel to. So there's a lot of different ways to make it happen, and certainly we've seen T-Mobile ads that are interesting and an opportunity to have a scene on the beach where someone's talking on the phone and something walks by and you want to look around. The ability to interact, pick up the Pond soap or in the virtual experience, being in REI, being able to walk around and see the different things, click on them for pricing and so forth.
So Digital Hollywood has asked me to moderate a couple of panels just on VR, right? Because so I get it, I know it's all I'm going to get to you. It's all coming, it's all happening, but nobody is giving me the answer to scale. Who's going to pay? How many people are going to pay $800 for this thing? And is it going to be, how are people going to walk around their house and do it? I still feel like the idea is bigger than the realization of this whole thing. I don't know. I make money and I was not buying $800 one. I bought the $12 one. And I've had some interesting experience on it, but I'm just not sure how it's going to scale. And I feel like there are a lot of obstacles to this thing. Does anybody have a comment on that?
Gamification. I think if there's one area that's begging for VR right now, it's games, isn't it? I mean, that's where we're going to see the early adopters.
You need to have the handset, though, right?
You have to have the handset, and the people who are prepared to part with several $100s to get that are the gamers. So there's nothing new about this or radical. I think we're seeing the games industry probably moving first into this space. I think creating a compelling series of dramas or soaps or sitcoms or adventures. There's a lot of experimentation still to come. I think we're talking about several years away before we can talk about that sort of content hitting us regularly. But games, I think the medium is made for the format.
Let me get to this gentleman in the back.
I was just going to ask you guys, just previously talking about the ads stuff, the campaigns you guys are running or foresee doing for brands that you're working with, how are you pricing them? What are they spending generally? Maybe giving me a range, but how are you pricing it? Is it just like
The ads that we've done have been a CPM basis. So far, the money that we've made in that regard is putting 360 video ads in a standard VPaid unit on a standard mobile web page where someone can see the inside of a hotel and turn around and look. And they're very engaging compared with a typical video ad. People quickly realize that the motion of their phone is interacting with the ad itself. And so the engagement level is pretty high. That's an early stage reaction because people don't necessarily expect to see these happen. But I think you have a really interesting opportunity to actually do AR with your phone, and people will pay for that as well. You got a camera. We saw it with Pokemon. We can put the same kinds of experiences into a typical banner or video ad that use the environment around you as well.
So we're actually doing this too, and we're pricing on a CPM or a CPE, but both with the 360 videos, right, and also with face filters, kind of like Snapchat has done. They've had success, like with Gatorade, where in the Super Bowl you could pour Gatorade over your head with their filter, and we've actually done this on desktop because we have a lot of scale there, and we found that with 80% of users having webcams now, once people opt into our ads, because we're permission based again, there's the majority of them will then turn on their camera and play with the AR face filter. And I think just last week, Snap now they're called, right?
Snap
they have their glasses, kind of like analogous to Google Glass, but they're only like $130 that they're coming out. So there's going to be a huge potential for AR once those hit the streets.
And that speaks to the other question you had, is like how is this going to gain any scale? The pricing on these products is going to drop so fast next year with Sony PlayStation out there with a unit, and just about every other.
Or what's it called?
Yeah. Every other company out there pretty much has
And the Oculus,
a solution.
that's going to come down? It doesn't feel like it. It should have come down already.
It will, but it's still new. The pricing is going to come under $20. You can get.
Samsung giving away a free VR headset with phones this year?
Yeah, I got one of those.
The Samsung Gear, the cost differential between the cardboard and the gear in terms of manufacturing is not huge. There's not a lot in it beyond the lenses. So to think that that's going to be under $20 within a year or two, and you have mass
That
distribution
changes everything,
is huge, because it's a really good experience, except for the phone overheats too quickly.
I actually love the commercial that's out recently where they're showing people getting very emotional. I mean, that is great storytelling. In fact, in our office, when we got the paper one, we made everybody try it. And just looking, if you've ever seen somebody experience VR for the first time, you think, I hope advertisers figure out a good way. This is going to be the savior of the whole thing once the thing comes way down. Let me jump to this lady's question. I want to make sure we
I'm
get
going to go back to because I'm a content creator, when you said that the onus should be put on the content provider, so to speak.
Opportunity.
Opportunity. Okay, I have to agree. I don't know if New York agrees with the middleman, that if I know what my content is, and I have the personnel, the problem is that a lot of companies don't have the personnel to go out and seek the advertiser. When I personally went to L'Oreal or whatever advertiser that, because I have a predominantly female audience, the unity and getting to the actual viewer was so much faster, going right to the brand and cutting out like the whole middle of trying to come to me. So I have to agree with you in that perspective. One of the best VR experience I had was an M&M experience for their 75th anniversary, and it was a fantasy. And what a lot of the researchers found out with the VR is that most people only want fantasy or travel. Sports is still on the sidelines. And so for advertisers, it seems like that should be, like you said, the area that you should most concentrate on. But explain to CBS or ABC, because for me, why wouldn't I put my own content? Why would I promote an ABC show if I have the eyeballs, as opposed to allowing advertisers to take up that real estate? So,
Who wants to take that
particularly
question?
with Fox and Empire, I saw that that's such a predominantly show, and they know exactly who their audience is, and they seem to just only advertise for that show. So for you to get an ad in there, or empire was really interesting.
All right, let me stop you
Okay.
right there so somebody can address that question. We only got 6 minutes left. Anybody want to take that question or know what the question was?
The question is basically, should the onus be put back, and should these content providers start staffing up in a way to go after the brands, as opposed to the brands trying to figure out, like, you know, how to get to the content provider?
It's probably too expensive for
Yeah.
most content creators to have their own sales force to go out and try to sell, placement or integration opportunities within their content.
And then not to mention L'Oreal doesn't want to meet with 2,000 content creators. It's just physically impossible. So that's why they hire the middleman, and the middleman is a big part of the problem because, but it is. It's absolutely, and that model's broken, right? I mean, you see brands, it's in the news every day. Walmart firing their advertising agency, bringing it in-house, and
Target.
and but it's, so you always going to have a better relationship when you get directly to the brand. It's just, it's very hard to do that consistently.
Well, what's the halfway mark?
The halfway mark is the right question. The halfway mark is you need to know your audience, you need to activate that audience, and you need to present it, whether it's directly to the brand or to the exchanges where the brands are doing their transactions. You need to present it in a way that makes it more valuable. It's about adding the metadata associated with who your audience is and the different ways that the buyers can interact with it at different times. You need to explain it in a way that doesn't let all of that data leak out. So the data about where your audience is going and when is being picked up by the advertising side.
Because there's a lot of complacency I found in the middleman and the advertising. They just got really freaking lazy, and I just felt like, I'm giving you the content, I'm giving you the eyeballs, but you're not meeting me halfway.
We got a couple more questions. Let me get to this lady.
So picking up on that, do you feel that in the short term, we're gonna move actually closer towards just straight time buys? Because right now there's a disconnect between ads, and I'm just talking about traditional broadcast television as opposed to cable, but there's a disconnect between ad sales teams who sell and what gets in content, and straight time buys, which is sort of like golden age of television, first edition.
All right, hold on. I got 3 people that want to respond. Chris, you go first, and then Mark, and then.
So everything, even back to the pricing on the VR question, like, should all be done on attention, because all of those which time spent with the unit, but like real attention, you're actively watching it, whether it's in VR, whether it's in 360 video, whether it's just on linear.
TV's not being judged that way of actively doing it. I love the stat that people are watching more and more TV over the years, because just like everybody in this room, you probably go into your house, you turn on your TV, you go to your kitchen, you go about your business. Are people actually watching more TV?
But that's not real attention. Like, we're trying to move to a market where you can buy real attention. You can throw out a lot of the buzzwords we use and just say, we actually had a person watch this. And in VR, you know where the headset's going. In an interactive ad, we have heat maps. These guys probably have heat maps. You can see what the user's doing. You also, because it's digital, you can track them down to where they built the car and maybe even filled out a purchase order.
But is
So we're
attention
getting
the
closer to
performance
measuring
metric
that.
you want? Is that where,
It
is that what?
You're selling the
that's how
ability
you-
to
Or is
deliver
that
a
a
message.
proxy for the ultimate sale of a product or
Well,
some
no,
other
because we all
KPI?
know there's more than just like the direct buy, right? So if you get to the whole funnel, you need attention because you got to start at the top. Somebody's eventually going to get credit when they click that retargeted ad, but we all know that didn't do 100% of the lifting.
For branding, you need attention. For bottom funnel performance, when people are ready to buy, you can measure it on did they buy. But if I'm trying to say, hey, I have a new brand, I just want you to be aware of it, you need to measure attention. And it's really interesting when you look at the sound off video, because I think those first few seconds really have a big impact. You can see it in the facial tracking, but you see that 85% of people watching those first few seconds on Facebook just watch a few seconds and go away. Only a small number of them actually engage. And so advertisers are pricing a lot of these impressions at the same level when they really need to price it on how much attention do they have, right? How many people actually paid attention for a little bit of time and how many people paid attention for a lot of time, and then these two audiences should probably be sold at separate rates.
Well, so these last 2 points were really important to me because I think and to the point that was made about publishers need to, there is more that the publisher can do, and of course broadcasters have been reaching out to brands for a long time and are very good at it. They still capture an enormous part of the ad spend. We're all about content. We ingest thousands and thousands of episodes of premium content, thousands of music videos, thousands of TV shows around the world. We find context within those TV shows, we turn that into inventory, and then we connect that inventory to brands. So I have a lot of sensitivity to the content issue here, because I think content is what drives the engagement. I think content is what makes the audience go to that place in the first place. So the closer you are, the more relevant you are to the content. This is why I think what TrueX is doing is also extremely important, because it is understanding the content context. So it's not just about the audience, but it's about the engagement that you can experience through that content. So we're certainly all about that.
Let me give Deb a chance to respond.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very insightful point you raised about the industry buying spots directly, because ultimately the measurement that really matters is where can you buy your most effective attention at the cheapest possible price. And by taking data across these different devices, different platforms, you can discover, for example, if you want to get your Porsche buyer, they could be watching a local channel at 2 a.m. You don't have to buy the more expensive spots. Ultimately, it's the data that's allowing brands to find these content that are previously thought to be in the tail. A lot of local TV inventory that's super underpriced. So by bringing data together from all these different sources, that's how a lot of the ad dollars are going to start flowing more and more towards what we consider fringe content. Right?
And this is assuming that attention means the same thing on TV, on a tablet, on a laptop,
yeah,
on a
and
smartphone.
on that point, really the key metric is sales, right? Sales lift, not
Or brand lift.
or brand lift, right? And there's a ton of other vanity metrics that you can come with, like I got X number of likes and shares, but ultimately, how does that translate to sales and brand lift?
We have a follow-up, just quick, so actually I think what you just described is how we flip the industry on that. So I'm on the television end of the business. The reason Mad Men stayed in production was not because it had 100 million viewers, it's because every viewer it had more than $100,000 worth of disposable income. Right. And what you're describing is shows stay on the air in large part because the brands realize that people will buy things if they're associated with that show. And what you just said to me, what sounds like what our business is going to move to, is tracking my ability to spend as an audience member. Not what I'm watching, but how much I can buy. If the brands are paying for it, what I can buy as a result of watching this cool show.
And that's
exactly where it's going.
And that's where the data becomes super valuable, where you're now able to take an online segment where I've seen someone, a brand comes in, BMW, with first-party data on who's visited my site, and now I can map that to cheaper inventory and where I can find these
and
users.
You don't care if I'm buying the car at 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, as long as I buy your car.
Yeah.
Were they an incredible panel or what? Please give me some applause. I'm gonna ask to take a picture with you guys. There's not another panel in here. I just checked with Steve for a few minutes, so if you want to ask an individual question, I'm hoping my guys are going to stay around.
Sure.
We didn't get to all the questions. You guys were a really, really engaged audience. We're going to take a picture together, and everybody stand up.